You are tuned in to another edition of Americana Music Profiles, brought to you by Americana Rhythm Music Magazine and AmericanaMusicMagazine.com. I'm your host, Greg Tutwiler. Let's jump right in to the next exciting interview. Beaver Creek, Colorado resident Jim Stanard once sold his childhood coin collection to buy his first guitar, a Martin D28, one that he still plays today. Jim, like many musicians, stepped away from the music for a while during his family-raising years, but picked it back up in the early 2000s from the encouragement of his wife and has recently recorded his debut CD entitled Bucket List. Jim and I talk about his music, his life around the music, and his new CD in this edition of Americana Music Profiles. Hi, Jim. Welcome to the podcast this afternoon.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for joining me. We're in Virginia. You're all the way across on the other side, right? Over in Colorado.
Yeah, I'm in the Rocky Mountains in Beaver Creek, Colorado, right now.
Oh, good. Okay. How close were you to the fires that were there not too long ago?
Not that close. There was a little bit of haze in the air, but fortunately not that close. And now we've, starting to turn fall out here. Leaves are starting to change because we're at over 8,000 feet, and the fire danger has started going down some. So that's good. Good. Yeah, well, good to hear that. So tell me, you've been at this for a while, right? Music has been in your blood for a long time. Well, yes, I in the late '60s, I graduated from high school in '66. So I was in college in the late '60s, and played music all throughout that time. So I grew up on classic rock and Bob Dylan and that era, have sort of did not move forward as a professional musician in the 70s. I went off into a business career, but have always had always continued to be interested, listening to music and doing some playing, and then really got back into it close to 10 years ago, I guess.
Okay. Did I read correctly? You actually attended Woodstock?
I did.
Yeah.
It was,
I'm honored. I don't think I've known any or spoken to anybody directly who was there. So.
Well, I mean, I'll just tell you, it's funny because it was. It was a mess. We basically escaped. We went Friday. I had with a friend, and the cars were parked many miles away. There was no food. It was raining, and I remember going to the concert, then sleeping overnight on somebody's porch, trying to get back to the car to get some food. And so my friend and I just ended up leaving Saturday night and washing off layers of mud. But I heard some of the music, but not the really headline acts.
Really,
but
okay.
2 weeks before that was a wonderful concert in Atlantic City called the Atlantic City Pop Festival that had a lot of big acts, and that was so back then. There was great live music
all over. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. How was that influential? And that's kind of a broad question, but was that the kind of thing that inspired you at that time to really pursue that, or had you already kind of been involved in music, playing from a playing perspective?
I was involved before that. I can't remember exactly what age I was. I was probably about 12 when I started playing guitar, and just really, really got into it, and went on from there. So it was sometime in the early '60s when I started, and then the music was just grabbed me, and the whole sequence of things from the '50s rock and Elvis to to Bob Dylan coming on the scene, and to then of course the Beatles and the Who and the Stones, and kind of from my perspective, I'm still kind of stuck in that era. When music turned into the mid '70s, there were a few acts that I really really loved from the '70s and '80s, and Bruce Springsteen, Tom Petty, Warren Zevon. But really, in the mid '70s, music kind of turned into a wasteland from my perspective. I was still listening to the earlier groups.
Now, did I read correctly that you actually sacrificed a childhood coin collection to buy your first guitar? Absolutely.
Well, it was my first good guitar. I bought a Martin D28 that I've still got. So that was a turning point back then. That was in '64 or something like that.
Yeah. So you were a young person when you did that.
Yeah.
You mentioned that kind of stuck in the '60s, but it seems like you kind of had an unlikely teacher then to kind of get you back into the music. When you got back into music, if I know my music history correctly, Kip Winger and the band Winger is pretty much that '80s epitome hair rock band, but that was someone who helped you kind of relaunch your music.
And I mean the funny thing is, Kip is a absolutely incredibly broad musician, and good friend of mine, but I never listened to him back in the '80s. In fact, I wasn't even aware of that whole strain of music. I wasn't listening to those people, and I got put in. So I'll tell you the story on that. So I went out, so in the when I picked up music again, I wanted to polish my performance skills, to be able to go out and play, and not anything big, but just local bars or whatever. And so I went to something called the Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp in Los Angeles.
Oh yeah,
which
cool.
Is run by David Fishoff, and it's fantastic. I went a number of years ago, and got put in touch with some wonderful musicians. And at the camp, we end up playing. They put bands together, and you end up playing the Whiskey A Go Go the last night, which is a fun experience. So anyway, David Fishoff. After that camp, I said, I really want to take singing lessons. Do you have anybody to recommend? And he said, there's only one person. He said, you got to get Kip Winger. And Kip was only teaching. He wasn't teaching much at all. He was working on his musical projects, and he would only really teach prose. But so David Fishoff, gave the intro. So Kip initially said, well, okay, I'll give you 6 lessons, and then I'll turn you over to somebody else. And I said, that's fine, that's great.
Sure.
And but he, I was doing my homework and working hard, and so he stuck with me, and he kept working with me, and then got into helping me with the songwriting, and helping me, he really was instrumental in the whole putting the album together, getting finding the session musicians for the album.
Really, that's cool.
And then, finding the mixer. Kip basically every step of the way guided me here.
Yeah.
And I had one other. So Kip really introduced me to everybody on the album, with one exception. I had been taking guitar lessons for a long time with somebody who lived a mile away from me in New Jersey, named John Skibick, who plays with the Afghan Wigs. And so John was very involved with the project also, and came out to Nashville when we recorded, and played lead guitar.
Uh-huh.
I'm still, so I still work with John. So that's, and one of the things I've learned from my business career is if you want to accomplish something, the first step is figure out who are the experts who can help you. I mean, just go figure out where can you get help.
Yeah.
And I was very fortunate to get two superb musicians helping me on this.
Yeah, that's awesome. What led you to the camp initially?
I'm not even sure I found out about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just some random ad or something, or article about it or something. But I like playing rock. I'm more of a, old folky acoustic finger picking, kind of style. I mean, that's what I normally play, but I try to play a little rock too. And, it just looked like a lot of fun and looked like I could learn a lot.
So the songwriting for you then, is that something that's been part of you all of your music life, or did that kind of come into play in the second incarnation of your music career?
No, it just came in the second reincarnation, which is really pretty funny. I mean, I've always written a lot for business and so forth. I mean, was always a very competent writer, but never a creative writer. I never wrote poetry, never wrote fiction or anything. And but I just love. I listen a lot. I mean, I just love Warren Zevon lyrics and Paul Simon lyrics and Bob Dylan, and I mean, they're playing in my head all the time. So it was really Kip's encouragement about saying, he was the one who suggested I ought to try it, and he sort of helped, guided me, and then once I started doing it, I got obsessed. So
yeah,
I then once again wanted to figure out, okay, I want to learn, find out who the best people to teach me are. How can I find them? And so I did, through word of mouth and asking around, and I've been able to get help from a number of professional songwriters in terms of teaching me techniques and critiquing songs and so forth.
And the record that's out now, I understand, is after all of this time, is actually your debut CD. Is that right?
Oh yes, yeah. First time.
Yeah, that's cool. And you wrote all the songs for this?
I did. Yes, I wrote them all.
Did you write the songs with the intention of them being on this CD? Like, were you writing for the CD, or did the CD evolve out of the songwriting?
It evolved. I mean, when I started, I wasn't sure, how whether the songs are going to be any good or not. Mm-hmm. I wasn't sure whether I just find write two songs and that's all I had or whatever. And I just went step by step, and I had the first few songs I wrote after, and I mean,